finishing up our NFC South roundup with the Carolina Panthers. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listener view every day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs, credentialed member of the media covering your Tampa Bay Buccaneers, here with you every Monday through Friday along with the everydayers. And for that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, one-on-one conversations with me via text message. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes to become an insider today. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. We are finishing up the NFC South Roundup series here with the Carolina Panthers. I was joined by Julian Council, the host of Locked On Panthers, to discuss what's been going on in Carolina, talking about their offseason moves, talking about what they're going to do in the draft, but really taking a look at where they are compared to the rest of the division. And obviously, I wanted to start the conversation off with the quarterback, because this was an impressive team down the stretch last year. Dave Canales, Bryce Young, they were trending up. So I wanted to get Julian's thoughts on where Bryce Young is right now, because towards the end of last season, he was really looking like the quarterback that a lot of people thought he was going to be when he was drafted number one. So what is the feeling around Bryce Young heading into 2025?
I think there's a level of confidence in what you saw in the final 9 weeks of the season that he can be that for the full 17 games, 18 weeks of next season upcoming here in 2025. And you go back to Week 18 on the road against Atlanta, where he really lit up a Falcons team that heading into that game, they had to win if they were going to win the NFC South and go on to the playoffs. And obviously we know that Tampa had won that game, had already won, and that Atlanta was already out of it by overtime. But still, for Bryce, for Carolina to close that thing out, it really was encouraging to start off 2025 with a bang then that way. And there's a lot of excitement about what he could do, but also, there's still a level of wait and see. There's a lot of bad tape out there from his rookie year in 2023 to the first three starts of his season last year in 2024. And yeah, he played well final 9 weeks. We got to see him do that through the course of an entire season. Can he do that? We'll see, as it's a huge year for Bryce. Carolina's going to have a decision to make this time next offseason, whether to exercise that fifth-year option or potentially extend him to a contract that makes him a franchise quarterback. So right now, he's a Panther starter, surefire for 2025. But is he going to be a long-term answer? Well, I guess we'll find out this fall.
All right. And of course, free agency still going on. What are some of the key additions and key departures there in Carolina for 2025?
Well, there are no key departures at all, in my opinion. Like losing Shaq Thompson, obviously it's unfortunate for someone who spent 10 seasons with the organization, but really it's only been 8 as he's missed the last 2 years with an Achilles injury, then a broken leg in week 2 a couple of years ago. So he's barely played for them. So that's a big loss in terms of what he meant to the franchise during his 10 seasons, really 8 seasons played, but on the field hasn't been there. So it's not like they're missing him. And then everybody else that they lost, Johnny Hekker wasn't as good as he was in Los Angeles when he was here in Carolina. Guys like Jordan Fuller and Dane Jackson, who they expected to be big players for them in the secondary, turned out to not be that as they were injured throughout the season. So there's not any significant losses at all for Carolina. As far as additions, you have to look at what they're able to do defensively as they added to all 3 levels of the defense, primarily looking at the interior defensive line. It looked like for a minute there that Milton Williams was coming to Carolina. Now, Brent Tillis, who's their executive vice president of football operations and handles salary cap and contracts, he came out on Wednesday when speaking to media and said that they never had the impression that things were being finalized with Milton Williams. So whoever put that out there on Twitter first, that was never true. He ended up, of course, in New England, and the money that they could have spent on Milton Williams, which is $26 million per year, by the way, more than what Derek Brown's making in Carolina. So I don't know how you would have justified that for a player who's never been a Pro Bowler, never played more than 47% of the snaps in a single season. How are you going to pay him more than your Pro Bowl defensive tackle who plays like 90% of the snaps when he's healthy? But adding the fact that they got Turk Wharton from Kansas City, adding Bobby Brown III, and then get Pat Jones as well. Those three guys, they don't come to Carolina if they sign Milton Williams. So those are all important additions. And so is Teron Morg out there at safety, as they lost all three of their safeties from a year ago that had started, that were expected to be their top guys. So those are the primary additions that they made. And there's been some retention, like Austin Corbett coming back for another year. Brady Christensen was a surprise. And J.C. Horn's not necessarily a retention, but that extension, obviously big news for them this offseason.
Now, I do want to touch on the running back situation there real quick, because I thought one of the most underrated signings was Rico Suave Dowdle there joining the group in Carolina. So obviously the first round pick last year doesn't really get a whole lot of playing time, but talk about kind of the running back situation now with Rico Dowdle joining the fold and can be a real dangerous weapon for this Panthers offense.
Yeah, that was an area that Carolina had to figure out this offseason. Clearly, Chuba Hubbard is the top guy here. He signed an extension in the middle of last season, and right after signing it, had a career day in that win against the Giants in Munich a year ago. So he's going to be the top back, but they needed to find out who the backup was going to be. Miles Sanders, he had an out in his deal, and Carolina wanted to find a way for him to accept a pay cut. He would not do that. So now he's in Dallas, and with Jonathan Brooks, they took in the second round last year, despite the fact that had a torn ACL late November of his final year at Texas. He probably was not going to be ready to go for most of the season, and that was the case. Played 3 games, re-tore the same ACL, and now out for all, if not the majority, of coming up here in 2025. So they need to find a backup, and I mean, damn. Rico Dowdle, really a dude coming off of his own career year like Chuba Hubbard, 1,000 yards rushing last season in Dallas. I know Cowboy fans aren't necessarily happy about that. I'm sure they'll be fine come draft night, as they're probably going to take a running back there in the first round, or at least early on here in this 2025 draft up in Green Bay. But that running back spot looks pretty good now with Chuba and with Rico Dowdle. And I mean, I would have to look across the league to see who the 1A, 1B, or the first team, second team backs are across the league. But this feels like one of the better duos that are out there. And Panther fans are thinking that they're going to have another D'Angelo Williams, Jonathan Stewart, smash and dash, double trouble kind of situation here. We'll see where that's the case. I don't know if either Chuba or Rico Dowdle were as good as Jonathan Stewart and D'Angelo were during their time here, but still, it's a good situation for them in the backfield, being able to run the ball, especially with everybody on the offensive line coming back. So that should certainly help assist Bryce Young in this offense this season.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested for us to be able to chat late in the season to see which duo is doing better, whether it's Dowdle and Hubbard or it's Bucky and Rashad, especially with the way Bucky Irving got going late in the season. But the next step, Julian, of course, is the NFL draft. What are the Panthers going to look to do when they are on the clock? That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Imagine watching your favorite team live, feeling the energy of the crowd and witnessing unforgettable moments. There's nothing like experiencing a big game in person. Getting tickets shouldn't be stressful. That's where Game Time comes in, making it easier than ever to grab last-minute seats at unbeatable prices. Game Time Picks curation makes it easier to find better value for tickets to sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. I just checked the Game Time app, and there are some amazing deals on some huge matchups coming up. In fact, I used Game Time to snag some tickets for a game I'm going to this week, and it honestly might be the best deal I have ever gotten on tickets for anything I have ever gone to. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. That's Locked On NFL, LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. The NFL draft is now about 3 weeks away, and the Panthers have plenty of ammo. I'm a little jealous. I'm not going to lie, Julian. I'm jealous of the amount of draft capital that the Panthers have to spend, that you're going to get to talk about all these different players. 9 total picks, 3 in the top 100, 5 in the top 120, 8 in the first 5 rounds. If you were ever going to have a draft with that many picks in the first 5 rounds, this is the one to do it. So what is the mindset for the Panthers coming into this draft as they continue to try to be a young team on the rise?
Yeah, and speaking of that draft capital, Football Perspective has Carolina ranked 7th as far as draft capital in this draft. And you're right, and they got a decent amount of picks, but I look at it, they have 3 in the top 100. So I don't know if they're going to be able to get that many impacts, day one kind of guys in this draft. And 3 fifth-round picks is all well and good, but I'm looking at the 5th-round pick they had last year, Shaw Smith-Wade, took until the latter part of the season for him to be a starter there at that nickel spot, and then he was out for the rest of the season. And then they didn't get much out of, they don't have a 6th-round pick this year, but they didn't get much out of Jaden Crumedy, and their 7th-round pick, they traded that away from Mike Jackson, and that really did work well for them. But yeah, they're going to really need to focus, I think, on the edge rusher spot in this draft class, and I think right there at 8 is probably the time to do it. I know it's supposedly a deep edge rusher class, but this is not the draft to wait for depth for Carolina when that edge rusher group, quite honestly, it's not good. I get it. Jadeveon Clowney, he's a name. He has not been that good since he left Houston. And if you look at what he's expected to be, he's never been that. So at this time in his career, he's not going to be it. Fine player last year for the most part, but if anyone's expecting him to go out there and be a double-digit sack guy, you're crazy. That's just not going to happen. DJ Wonnum, I think, had he been healthy last year, probably could have matched that 8 sack total he had in his final year in Minnesota, something he's done twice in his career, but he missed those first 9 games because of blood clot. Now this year, if he can stay healthy, I think he can be solid for them, but ain't nobody scared of DJ Wonnum. Same case with Pat Jones, the second who they just brought in from Minnesota, similar to Wonnum, a upside guy, but again, ain't nobody scared of Pat Jones II. So go out there, find a true replacement to Brian Burns and someone who other defensive offensive coordinators will actually have to game plan for moving forward.
Now, this is the 3rd NFC South team, including my own, that have talked about focusing on getting an edge rusher in the first round. Yeah, Aaron of Locked On Falcons was talking about how they've been like the worst edge rush team in the NFL since like 2016 or whatever it was. And that's his focus. That's your focus. I still think it's, even with the signing of Hassan Reddick, it's definitely an option for the Buccaneers at 19. But you're going to have the first option here as far as the division is concerned at pick number 8 for those edge rushers. So who are some guys that you are eyeing for Carolina there in the first round?
Well, I'm just seeing the consensus from all the folks that really dive into the draft, and it's been Jalen Walker from Georgia, and he's somebody who can fill 2 needs for Carolina. He can fill the need as an edge rusher and also play at that off-ball linebacker spot, and that's a question mark, I think, for the future. Josie Jewell, Christian Roseboom, they signed from the Rams, and then Trevin Wallace, 3rd-round pick from a year ago. Those 3 are going to compete for those starting roles, but then Roseboom and Jewell probably, depending on how things play out, not here this time next year. So they're going to need to look down the road. And they did that last year by drafting Trevin Wallace, who no one expected to be someone they'd be targeting there in the 3rd round, linebacker, that spot in particular, and running back was the same case in the 2nd round. So that could fulfill 2 holes there if they get Jalen Walker. He's from Salisbury, just north of Charlotte, and he's a guy who apparently his leadership there at Georgia is something that was really impressive, and Carolina's looking for those culture kind of guys, those tone setters, and he can absolutely be that for them while also fulfilling 2 pretty big needs, in particular the need for an edge rusher. So he's the guy I'm looking for. Like Abdul Carter's not going to be there at 8. So, I mean, if somehow he's down there, like, yeah, that's the guy to take, obviously. Probably, I don't know. Like, this is not my forte of the value of whether you can take him that early or not. But, like, if you like him or not, I mean, hell, it doesn't matter. Like, I guess probably too early to get a guy like Green from Marshall. Probably too early to get Michael Williams. We'll see. There's still plenty of time for the NFL draft industrial complex to rip these guys to shreds to decide whether they're worthy or not. So we'll see what they decide to do. But I think Jalen Walker, from just what all those folks have said, appears to be the consensus there at 8.
Well, and still plenty of time for a video of Abdul Carter wearing a gas mask to leak and have him, slide down that draft board. I can't even remember. I know it was a guy from LSU, but I can't remember which player it was.
It was Laramie Tunsil, Ole Miss.
It was.
Yeah. It was allegedly, it was like his uncle who was putting it out there. But yeah, the gas mask and the Confederate flag photo, it worked out for him. He got to live in Miami. Oh, the horror. And then he got paid a ton of money later on, still getting paid. So, hey, Like, because I hear it all the time, like character issues. I think James Pierce Jr. is one of those guys, Charlotte dude, and I've yet to hear what the character issue is. Was he involved in a high-speed race that led to a teammate and a staffer dying? Was he an accessory to murder? No? Okay, well, then why are we talking about these a lot of times? It's just that's the one thing that just drives me nuts. But we'll see how it plays out with the draft.
I actually tried diving into the James Pierce Jr. stuff, and I couldn't really find anything. Like
because there's nothing.
It, and I'm like, I don't know where this is coming from, other than he said kind of stuff. Like, I don't know. I'm sure we'll find out as we get closer to the draft, because that's when all that stuff starts to leak out. But outside of edge rusher, obviously you've talked about, I know on our crossovers last year, we talked plenty about the struggles of the defense. Is that really kind of the big focus for the Carolina Panthers in this draft? I'm sure they would love to get another, top end receiver for Bryce Young, but is it going to be a really defensive centric draft for Carolina? And maybe who are a couple of names or just positions that you would look for them to really prioritize on day 2?
Yeah, I do think that as far as I got to imagine they go defense there. Day 2, I've seen a lot of people say that corner is a spot they might try to address. And looking at it right now, they do need a third outside corner. It's going to be J.C. Horn again. It's going to be Mike Jackson. And then they don't really have that outside guy. Shaw Smith-Wade, a 5th rounder from Washington State from a year ago. He'll be in there at that slot corner spot. But they don't really have an outside. And you could wonder, Mike Jackson, that deal he signed, it's a 2-year deal, which means it's a 1-year deal. And if he does not play up to it, then he'll be out of here this time next year. And they would need another guy opposite of JC. So it would make sense to get somebody, whether it be in a second round or maybe they wait later on, day 3, like early, like the 4th round. They have like 2 early 4th round picks there next to each other. Maybe they try to address it then. I would think that could make some sense. I mean, defensive line, they're kind of good. When you get a Pro Bowler like Derek Brown back off injury, you're going to count him as kind of a free agent addition. And he still has 4 years left in that deal that he signed last year. This is actually the first year of that extension kicking in. And when you add Turk Wharton, Bobby Brown, you have A'Shawn Robinson coming back, Shai Tuttle more at a reduced role, which is going to be better for them. Brian Ray, I think they're good on the interior. I don't think that they need to necessarily go out there and get somebody very early on. They drafted someone last year, Jaden Crumity, who will be a part of that rotation as well again this upcoming season. So I don't look at that. I mean, I guess you could double up on edge later on if you want to. Safety, that's a spot for sure. Dan Morgan talked about this on not last Wednesday. He was saying how they really needed to talk about getting a safety, as they're pretty thin there. They have 3 guys on the roster. Demani Richardson, who's a UDFA from a year ago, who took over as a starter late last season. Sharon Moore, who they signed from the Raiders during free agency. And then Nick Scott, who's completely unplayable when the actual defense is being played. As far as special teams, totally fine. But he cannot see a single snap defensively unless it's a blowout or Carolina's getting blown out. Either way, he's just not somebody who's going to help him. So they know they need to add to that group. Maybe they get a veteran, but certainly they're going to look to add there as far as in the draft. And I would think that could happen maybe at 74 there in the 3rd round, if not earlier in the 2nd round of 57. And offensively, don't think they need any offensive lineman at this point in time. You could guess you could get a tackle if you were planning on replacing Taylor Moton after the season. But yeah, receiver, this just ain't the draft to do it, I guess, if you're trying to get that like wide receiver 1 kind of guy. I know people are going to talk themselves into Tedrow McMillan, who I like, and Matthew Golden, who I also think's pretty good, but also no one could name who Matthew Golden was back in October before he kind of took over when Isaiah Bond didn't live up to all that money, that Lambeau money they gave him down there in Austin. So I don't know. I'm just not in love with the wide receiver class. So I think they can probably get away with what they have this year. It's not going to scare anybody, but I do think there should be some improvement from Coker and Leggett to where they're probably fine, not good if they don't add a difference maker there at receiver. So those are kind of the spots I'm looking at this point in time.
All right. Well, where does Julian think that the Panthers stack up against the rest of the NFC South as things stand today? That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. Wrapping things up here on our NFC South focus with the Carolina Panthers. And I'm going to be honest with you. The Panthers have gotten some buzz on this show over the last couple of weeks, including yesterday's episode, as a team that could be dangerous in the next year or two and really has a chance to make some noise this season. So when you look at the Panthers compared to the rest of the South, as things stand here before the draft, how do you feel they stack up against the rest of the teams in the division?
Yeah, it's a line of scrimmage game. That's the first thing I'm going to look at when evaluating any team. I don't really care who your quarterback is if they're on their ass the entire time. And we've seen that happen plenty of times in this game. And here in Carolina, whenever Carolina's had an offensive line that's either had the requisite talent or been healthy, they've been competitive. When they haven't had the talent or been healthy, they've been a complete train wreck. Look at 2023 when they went 2-15. Look at 2021 when they started out 3-0 and then couldn't win any games, finished, I think, 5-12 that season. So I look at it offensive line wise, they were dramatically improved last year, and bringing back every single one of those guys, including backups like Brady Christensen, is huge for them. So I love the continuity that they have there and the overall talent level. Like, do they have any Pro Bowl or all pro kind of guys? Probably not, but if they can stay healthy and you have that continuity, like that's pretty damn important. So I think they're good there. Defensive line wise, having Derek Brown back's huge. I think Bobby Brown the third will really help them in terms of stopping the run. Turk Wharton adds an element there from the interior perspective as far as a pass rusher. Edge, I still not concerned about, don't love that. But I do think they're better as far as they should be able to stop the run, and that will keep the linebackers clean. It should help out the secondary as well. And a guy like Moore should really help them in terms of being able to come up and make those tackles. Guys in the secondary last year at safety could not really do that. So I do think they're much better on both sides of the line of scrimmage, in particular the defensive line, than they were a year ago. And they have a quarterback who I didn't think there was confidence in. There are guys that he was here with last year at that receiving core where they can continue to grow this offense. And I do think that they can really lean in that run game. And Canales talk about being starting around the football. Never saw it last year, but when you have Rico Dowdle and Chuba Hubbard coming off 1,000-yard rushing seasons and the entirety offensive line coming back, there's really no excuse to not be that way, especially if you're not going to add to the receiver core. Like, if this is going to be the receivers you got, well, then yeah, you need to run the ball because it's just not that talented at this point, at least that proven. So we'll see. But there's not a quarterback in this division that really is somebody that you're really looking at as like, okay, well, he's insurmountable. Like, I think that Baker Mayfield clearly is the best guy, but if this is who Baker's going to be, okay, like, yeah, he's good, but it's not like it's not like it's impossible for somebody to match his play. It's impossible right now in the AFC East for anyone to match the play of Josh Allen. It's impossible for anybody, hell, in the AFC North to match, well, not to match Joe Burrow and Lamar, but hell, Joe hasn't been an MVP yet. So it's not possible for anyone to match Patrick Mahomes' play out there in the AFC West. Like, that's not the case in the NFC South. Someone can play up to the level or right there close to Baker Mayfield, and you can be right there in it. And if you have a better offensive line, a better defensive line, then maybe you win it. So I think they'll be competitive. I'm not going to sit here and say they're going to win the division. I'm not going to sit here and say they're going to have a winning record. Like, they got to go out there and prove it to me first, man. I'm not putting myself out there on the line just to watch these guys go out there and embarrass me.
Yeah, we'll save the embarrassing takes for the NFC South crossover that we'll do later on this year. But if you had to pick a team in the division that you feel is going to surprise a lot of people, and it can be a good surprise or a bad surprise, what team are you going with and why?
Well, I don't look at New Orleans necessarily as being that surprise. Like, I guess Derek Carr has it in him. But no, I don't really see that happening. Atlanta, maybe. I really do like Michael Penix Jr., and he's got weapons there. And if he's got a decent offensive line, I know they're kind of, the money situation is not that great down there. They could be surprising. I don't think there's anybody who's gonna like surprise. Like, what is a surprise in the NFC South? Like, not being completely terrible, like winning 11 games, is that the surprise? Like, if someone goes out there and wins like 12 or 13, yeah, that would be surprising to me. So I don't look at anybody who really would just shock me. I think all these teams are not that far from each other, and it's not the best division in football. It's better than the AFC South, I would think, just because that's just a track outside of Houston. Like, this can be a little bit more competitive. I still think that Atlanta has a chance. I think Tampa should be the top dogs at this point in time. And, Carolina, they're trailing behind, but there's some possibilities that this year maybe they finally can put it together. And New Orleans, we'll see. So there's not anybody I think is a surprise team at this point, like looking at things and how guys are constructed. But if I was going to be surprised by anything, it'd be like someone winning 12 games in this division this upcoming season.
All right. Well, Julian, I certainly appreciate you coming on and filling all of the Bucs fans in on what's going on there in Carolina. Of course, check out Julian over on Locked On Panthers. And I threw this out there to Aaron. I'll throw it out there to you. If any team not named the Buccaneers drafts Benjamin Morrison, I am challenging the host of that show to a boxing match for charity, because Benjamin Morrison's my dude, and I've I have to watch him play against Tampa twice a year, I'm going to be very angry. So we're going to get that. We're going to get that going.
Okay. Notre Dame guy coming off an ACL. Hopefully it works out for him because he is a great player. And it's unfortunate because he probably would have been a first round pick had that not happened to him. So,
yeah, that's what I've been saying on my show. And it's like, if it wasn't for that hip surgery, he's probably the best corner in the draft. So we'll have to see.
Well, no, let's not be ridiculous now.
I mean,
Travis Hunter does exist.
He's good.
Let's not be the Thorpe Award and give it to Jahdae Barron when there's this guy who's literally doing it both on both sides, best receiver and best corner, win the Heisman Trophy. But no, Jahdae Barron's best corner. Like let's not be ridiculous.
All right. With that, Julian, again, thank you so much for jumping on. Looking forward to talking to you again here sooner than later after the NFL draft.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
All right. That is going to do it for this episode. Please make sure that you are following along with everything on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at @Yarcho_Bucs. Make sure that you are subscribed on YouTube with those notifications turned on, as well as wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to help support the show, become a Locked On Bucs insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes. If you don't want to become an insider, but you do want to support the show, take a moment, please. Leave a 5-star review wherever you listen to the show. Leave a little bit of a review. It does help other Buccaneers fans find the show. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. I want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.